My family mocked my tiny gift, but when they opened it, they couldn't believe what they saw. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of pine and expensive perfume. It was Christmas Eve, and the annual family party at Lucas's parents' mansion was in full swing. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes, their faces glowing from the warm firelight and too much holiday cheer. Around the massive, antique mahogany table, gifts were piled high, wrapped in shiny paper and tied with huge silk bows. These weren't just any gifts. They were extravagant, over-the-top presents, the kind you saw in glossy magazines. Earlier, Lucas's brother had given his wife a diamond necklace that made her gasp. Lucas had given me a fancy designer handbag, which I accepted with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I knew what was coming next. When it was my turn to put my present down, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small, plain brown box. I placed it gently on the table among the colorful towers of gifts. My sister-in-law, Chloe, Lucas's brother's wife, spotted it right away. She was always the first to notice anything that wasn't flashy enough. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow and let out a little, fake cough to get everyone's attention. Then, she sneered, her voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Oh, how adorably cheap." A wave of laughter swept across the room, cold and sharp. I felt my chest tighten, but I held my ground. I forced a small, weak smile, but I knew my eyes were giving away the truth. They were glistening with unshed tears, betraying the hurt I felt deep inside. My little brown box became a cruel joke. It was the runt of the litter, a silent, humble offering next to the roaring lions of luxury. Before anyone was supposed to, my gift was picked up and passed around the table, like a silly toy at a kid's party. Everyone wanted to feel its lightness, to guess what tiny, useless thing it held. Finally, Lucas's mother, Patricia, gently tore off the simple paper. Inside was another box, made of dark velvet. It was even smaller. They all leaned in, their faces tight with expectation and ready to mock. Chloe reached out and opened the velvet box with a dramatic flourish, like a magician revealing a dove. But instead of a dove, there was only a tiny, smooth velvet pouch nestled inside. She gasped, a sound of pure, mocking disbelief. "A keychain!" she exclaimed, holding up the small object inside the pouch. It was a simple, unadorned silver loop. The laughter this time was louder, more vicious, and it seemed to shake the very crystal glasses on the table. My face burned with embarrassment. I tried to speak, to give meaning to the small, deliberate gift. "It's more meaningful than it looks," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper against the wave of their amusement. Chloe just rolled her eyes and gave a fake, pitying sigh. "Sure, sweetheart," she cooed, her eyes shining with malice. "Meaningfully broke. That's what it means." The punchline landed hard, and I felt the last bit of Christmas cheer drain right out of the room, leaving behind only the bitter taste of humiliation. The dinner that followed was a blur of expensive wine and loud, careless chatter. I tried to eat the fancy food, but it felt like ash in my mouth. My small gift had spoiled the mood, not for them but for me. The laughter kept echoing in my ears, making it hard to breathe. As I walked to the powder room after the main course, I heard their whispers coming from the library. They didn't think I was listening, or maybe they just didn't care. "She married rich and still acts poor," I heard Chloe say, her voice sharp with judgment. Another voice, my brother-in-law's, chuckled in agreement. "It's embarrassing. Lucas should talk to her." I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding a sad, slow rhythm. When I came back to the dining room, I looked straight at Lucas, my husband. I desperately searched his eyes for some sign of support, a quick frown, a secret, apologetic look, anything that told me he was on my side. But he didn't look up. He was busy talking to his father about a business deal, his face blank, his eyes avoiding mine. He looked away. That silence from him was a final, shattering blow. It was worse than all of Chloe's cruel jokes combined. It wasn't just my family mocking me. It was the man who was supposed to be my partner. That silence didn't just hurt me. It broke something fundamental inside my soul. It was the moment I realized I was completely alone in that lavish, cold house. In the quiet of our guest room later that night, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the memories wash over me. It felt like another lifetime ago, but it was only a few years. I had been Ava, the founder. I had run a small, brilliant tech startup, working on an early form of artificial intelligence software. I lived and breathed code, full of passion and big dreams. The montage flashed quickly in my mind. Late nights fueled by coffee, the thrill of our first successful test, the proud faces of my small team. But then came Lucas. He needed me. He had a great opportunity, a dream job that required him to move across the country and he convinced me that we needed to focus on his career first. He said my startup could wait. So, I did the loyal wife thing. I put my company on hold, selling off my small stake to cover the move and sacrificing my daily reality to support his big, shiny future. I believe in his dreams more than I fought for my own. Now, the roles were painfully clear. Lucas had his high-paying executive job, his status, his successful life. I was just his unemployed, unappreciated, and invisible wife. My once vibrant tech career was a distant memory. I was simply the woman who brought the cheap keychain to the Christmas party. The laughter and his silence felt like a payment for a debt I didn't owe. I had given up my life for his, and this was the thanks I got. I went to the bathroom and looked at my reflection. The tears were finally gone, replaced by a cold, clear determination. My gift wasn't just a keychain, and they didn't understand that. I looked at the small velvet pouch lying on the marble counter. Inside the pouch, hidden beneath the silver ring, was the second part of my true gift. It was a tightly sealed letter, folded so small it fit perfectly in the palm of my hand. I picked up my purse and pulled out the envelope. The paper was heavy, expensive. I knew what the letter said, because I wrote it, but it hadn't been meant for Christmas. It was supposed to be a surprise, a secret gift of success to celebrate a future win. But now it was a weapon. I held the sealed paper, a faint smile touching my lips. "You'll understand one day," I whispered to the empty room, my voice flat and final. "Or maybe you won't." The letter held the key to the future they had laughed away. The next morning, I saw the true extent of their cruelty. I logged into my social media, and there it was, Chloe's spiteful post. A close-up photo of a silver keychain, captioned with a mean-spirited judgment. "Not all wives of taste." The laughing emoji was a dagger. It was trending among family friends, and comments poured in, most of them nasty. Without a word, without a moment of hesitation, I quietly deactivated my account. I was done watching their cheap spectacle. I was done being their punchline. I was done being the person they thought they knew. The next morning, the confrontation I knew was coming finally happened. Lucas stood by the bed, already dressed in his expensive work suit, looking angry. He didn't ask how I was. He went straight to the attack. "You embarrassed me last night," he said, his voice flat and accusing. I stared up at the ceiling, feeling a strange calm wash over me. His words were just noise now. I got out of bed slowly, folding a sweater that lay on the chair. I turned to him, my gaze steady. "I embarrassed you, or they embarrassed me?" I'd asked him, the question hanging heavy between us. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of years of neglect. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He looked down at the carpet, shuffled his feet, and then just shrugged, muttering something about a big meeting. That shrug, that inability to stand up for me, was the last straw. The marriage wasn't broken by anger or fights. It was broken by his weak silence. I knew then that I needed a new plan. I walked over to the closet and pulled out a small duffel bag. I started putting in a few essential clothes, my laptop, and my worn coding notebooks. I wasn't packing to leave him right away, not yet. I was moving in silence, creating a new, secret life for myself, one he wouldn't even know existed until it was too late. I was done being his wife who stayed quiet. Alone in the house while Lucas was at work, I went to the old, dusty study, the one he never used. I sat at the mahogany desk and powered up my old laptop, the one I hadn't opened in almost 2 years. It felt like greeting a long-lost friend. My fingers instinctively typed in the password to my old work email address, the one linked to my former startup, the one Lucas insisted I forget about. The screen loaded, and my hand started to shake, not from fear, but from a growing electric excitement. There it was, an email from many months ago, buried deep beneath hundreds of spam messages. It was from a major, recognizable tech firm. I clicked it open. The subject line was simply, "Confidential, final buyout offer for Sentinel AI." Sentinel AI was the name of my old software. The body of the email confirmed the offer was still on the table. They wanted to purchase the rights to the AI algorithm I had written. The number they named was huge. Millions. A silent, cold laugh escaped my throat. I looked at the old keychain sitting on the desk. They had laughed at my tiny gift, calling me broke. My hand stilled over the keyboard. I was not broke. I was rich. I was just keeping my wealth a secret. They laughed too soon. Instead of hitting the reply button on the multi-million-dollar offer, I closed the email window. A different, far more satisfying idea was already taking root in my mind. Why sell a masterpiece for a quick payday when I could use it to build an empire and get my revenge? A simple cash-out wouldn't teach them the lesson they needed to learn. They needed to see what they had lost, and, more importantly, what they had mocked. I needed a resurrection. I decided right then and there to relaunch the software myself, but in complete stealth mode. My goal wasn't just money anymore, it was poetic justice. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed an ally, someone who knew my code and, more importantly, knew my worth. I picked up my phone, my fingers flying across the screen until I found the contact I needed. My old friend and co-founder, Dylan. He was the only person who knew the true power of Sentinel AI. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice sounding surprised. Ava, is that really you? I haven't heard from you in forever. I took a deep breath. I'm back, Dylan, I said, my voice low and firm. I'm done being their punchline. I'm ready to finish what we started. He paused on the other end. Then a wide, excited grin came through the phone line. You're back, he asked, a hint of awe in his voice. Better than ever, I promised. I'm done being the small one. The next few days were a whirlwind of secret meetings and careful planning. The most important step was creating a physical distance from my old life, a place where I could work without Lucas noticing. I quietly rented a small, nondescript co-working space downtown. It was nothing fancy, just a room with a desk and a high-speed internet connection, but it felt like freedom. It was my war room. The first thing I did was choose a new name for the project. The old name, Sentinel AI, felt too passive now. My new project had to be a statement. I chose Project Ember. An ember is a tiny piece of glowing coal after a fire is almost out. It looks small and weak, but it holds the heat and the power to start a massive new fire. I smiled faintly to myself as I wrote the new name on the whiteboard in my small office. From ashes to flame, I whispered. It felt exactly right. I wasn't selling out. I was rising up. Dylan joined me the next day, bringing his own quiet excitement and technical genius. We started working on the old code, rewriting the core algorithm to make it 10 times faster and more powerful than the original version. The code flowed from my fingers as easily as breathing. I realized this work was the only time I truly felt like myself. As I was shutting down the laptop late that night, a new email notification flashed onto the screen. It was from a powerful venture capital firm. Confidential investor interest. The game had begun. Please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. I knew my life was becoming a carefully constructed lie. By day, I was Lucas's wife, putting on the right clothes, making sure the house was running smoothly, and answering his casual questions with vague, harmless replies. By night, I was Ava, the founder, building an empire in a dusty, small office. My first big meeting was with the venture capital firm. They were very interested, but they wanted to control the company. They wanted to own a huge chunk of my code and put their own people in charge. They didn't see me. They saw a valuable piece of software they could buy. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. I want ownership, I told them firmly. No one takes my name off it again. I retain full control of the core technology. They were surprised, but they respected my demand. They had never expected such confidence from the woman they had only heard about as Lucas's quiet wife. I walked out of that meeting with their first offer on a napkin and a promise that they would match my terms if I could prove the prototype was viable. I went straight to the small co-working space, feeling energized. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about proving my worth to myself, and then, much later, proving it to the people who had laughed. I was done being the woman Lucas called unambitious. My ambition was about to explode. I knew I had to keep up appearances, but the fake smiles were starting to wear thin. A few weeks after Christmas, Chloe called. She had the nerve to invite me out for coffee, claiming she wanted to mend fences after the holiday drama. I knew better. She wanted information, a chance to mock me up close again. I played along perfectly. No hard feelings about Christmas, she asked, batting her long eyelashes across the small bistro table. I took a slow sip of my latte. Of course not, Chloe. I lied smoothly. It was just a little gift. She laughed, that tinkling, cold sound I had grown to hate. Well, maybe next year. Go for something more visible, she suggested, leaning in conspiratorially. Something that screams success, you know. I felt a slow, dark fire ignite in my gut. I looked her right in her shallow, calculating eyes. Oh, don't worry, Chloe, I replied, my voice sweet as honey. You will definitely see next year's gift. In fact, everyone will. It's going to be very, very visible. She looked confused for a split second, then quickly laughed it off, clearly thinking I was just joking about a new diamond ring. I smiled, letting her believe her own foolish assumptions. She had no idea that the smallest gift I could give her would be the biggest, loudest humiliation. My life became a demanding dance between two worlds. By day, I was the perfect wife. I cooked dinner, I managed the house, and I listened patiently to Lucas's long, boring stories about his own successful deals. He never once asked about my day or what I was doing, which was exactly what I needed. By night, I was a founder on a mission. My co-working space became my second home. I was coding for hours, meeting with Dylan and my new, small team, and talking to investors on secure video calls. The momentum was incredible. My hands, which Lucas hadn't even noticed, were now moving a multi-million-dollar business. Lucas still saw me as the same woman who had sacrificed her career for him. He continued to make subtle digs, calling me unambitious when I politely refused to attend one of his endless corporate charity dinners. "You need to get out there, Ava," he'd say dismissively. "You need to build a new network." I just smile and reply, "I'm building it, Lucas." Quietly, I hid the truth from him with effortless ease. He never looked at my laptop, never checked my purse, and never once asked to see my phone. His own self-importance made him completely blind to my existence outside of his orbit. He had no idea the woman sleeping next to him was orchestrating a massive takeover. The talks with the leading VC firm grew serious. They were ready to invest a massive amount of money to launch Project Ember, but they kept pushing for a bigger stake. In one meeting, the lead partner, Mr. Chen, a man known for his tough negotiating style, tried to sweeten the deal by offering me a huge personal salary. "It would make you independently wealthy, Ava," he tempted, his eyes gleaming. "You wouldn't have to worry about anything." I pushed the contract back across the table. "I'm already independent, Mr. Chen," I said, my voice steady. "The money is secondary. This is my code, my legacy. I refuse to sell control for cash. I want ownership. No one takes my name off it again." I explained that I needed to retain over 51% of the company and full creative control. I knew my worth and the true value of my AI. I had given up control once to support my husband's dream, and I would never make that mistake again. My firmness surprised them, but it also earned their respect. They realized I wasn't some timid housewife trying a hobby. I was a true founder. A few days later, Mr. Chin called back. "Your terms are tough, Ava," he admitted, a note of respect in his voice. "But your technology is tougher. We accept. Let's build an empire." My first big victory was complete. My sister-in-law, Chloe, was always finding a way to make me feel small. A few weeks later, she planned another dinner, claiming it was to mend fences again. But I knew the real reason. She wanted a stage to brag. During the cocktail hour, I found myself standing near the kitchen, and I overheard her talking loudly on the phone to one of her friends. She was going on and on about a new investment she and her brother were making. "Yes, darling, we're investing in real startups," she drawled into the phone. "Not these little garage projects that go nowhere. We need something big, something with market visibility." She punctuated the sentence with a loud, dismissive laugh. I leaned against the doorframe, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. She was talking about me, without even knowing it. She was bragging about investing in the big leagues, while I was quietly building the very league she hoped to join. The irony was sweet, like a perfectly aged wine. I took a deep breath. My quiet project, Project Ember, was about to become the most visible thing she had ever seen. "Let's see about that," I murmured to myself, raising my glass in a silent toast to the war she didn't know I was winning. The weeks of intense, silent work finally paid off. I arrived at the co-working space one morning, and Dylan was waiting for me, his face glowing with suppressed excitement. "Ava, you need to see this," he whispered. He pulled up the code on his screen and ran the final test sequence for our newest algorithm. It was the moment of truth for Project Ember's prototype. We watched the screen light up with the final results. The new AI was faster than any current automation software on the market, predicting market trends with unheard-of accuracy. It was a complete, overwhelming success. Dylan turned to me, his eyes wide. "This tech could revolutionize automation," he said, his voice full of awe. "It could change how entire industries operate." I didn't cheer and I didn't shout. I just felt a deep, powerful sense of calm satisfaction. "Then let's not just change an industry, Dylan," I replied, my voice low and firm. "Let's make it poetic." We spent the rest of the day planning the full market launch. We would aim for maximum impact, making sure the success was so loud and so undeniable that no one could mock my tiny beginnings ever again. This wasn't just a business plan, it was a revenge strategy. The silence of the small office was a powerful contrast to the roaring success we had just created. The press leak was my idea. I knew I couldn't launch a multi-million-dollar company in secret, but I could certainly control the narrative. I wanted the public, and most importantly, my family, to be aware of a rising, powerful force without knowing it was me. I carefully contacted a trusted tech journalist, an old acquaintance from my startup days, and gave him an anonymous, detailed tip. A few days later, the internet buzzed. A major tech blog ran a massive teaser article about a revolutionary new software that was about to disrupt the automation industry. The company was anonymous, but the power of the code was not. The journalist cleverly nicknamed the software Phoenix Code, writing that it was rising from the ashes of a forgotten idea. The article went viral, sparking massive speculation across the tech world. Investors, competitors, and the public were all trying to figure out who the anonymous founder was. Meanwhile, I was safely hidden in my small office, smiling at my laptop screen. The best part? My family was completely oblivious. They were talking about the Phoenix Code at a dinner party Lucas brought me to, wondering aloud who the brilliant mind behind it could be. Must be some Silicon Valley hotshot, Lucas declared confidently. Ava's secret identity stayed hidden. I just nodded along, stirring my drink, enjoying the irony. The secret of my late nights started to wear on Lucas. He was a creature of routine, and my unpredictable schedule was making him suspicious. I was rarely home before 10 p.m., and I always had a plausible but vague excuse: a new book club, a difficult yoga class, or helping an old friend with a complicated project. One evening, he waited up for me, sitting in the living room with his arms crossed, his face dark. "Who are you seeing, Ava?" he demanded the moment I stepped through the door. His tone was accusatory, possessive. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was worried about my time and attention not being focused on him. I didn't panic. I had prepared for this moment. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice perfectly calm and honest, though he didn't understand the truth behind the words. "I'm seeing someone who believes in me," I replied simply. "Someone who respects my ambition." His face darkened further. He didn't ask for names or details. He just saw a vague threat to his control, a mysterious person stealing his wife's time. He didn't connect my late nights to work because he was certain my work was worthless. The more he pushed, the calmer I became. My work was not only a secret from him, it was a powerful new source of confidence he couldn't touch. The climax of Act 2 was quickly approaching. Chloe, still oblivious and determined to prove her family's social standing, planned a massive, expensive party to celebrate her new business launch. It was a small, high-end consulting firm, nothing compared to the company I was building, but she acted like she was the next Steve Jobs. The invitation was slipped under our door, a huge, silver-embossed card. I was invited, of course, but only reluctantly, as a kind of necessary accessory to Lucas. I smiled when I saw the date. Perfect timing. I knew I had to attend. It would be the stage for my first public, undeniable statement. I didn't want to just show up. I wanted to walk onto her stage and own the spotlight. I immediately started planning my outfit and my strategy. I would go with something that was tiny but powerful, mirroring the nature of my gift and my company. This party wasn't just Chloe's launch. It was going to be my global debut. The thought filled me with an exhilarating rush. The day I'd been quietly working toward for months was finally here. The night of Chloe's big party, the tension in our house was unbearable. Lucas came home early, already dressed in his tuxedo, and saw me putting on a sleek black suit. He immediately tried to take control. "You need to skip the event, Ava," he demanded, his voice suddenly hard. "My boss has some concerns about your behavior at Christmas. You need to lay low and let me handle things." His real concern was that my presence would draw attention away from him, or that I might somehow embarrass him again. I calmly zipped up the side of my dress and turned to face him. "I've missed enough of my own life already, Lucas," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I am going." He looked completely shocked by my simple refusal. In all our years of marriage, I had always given in to his demands. He muttered a threat under his breath, something about how "you'll regret it," but his words had no power over me anymore. I was already walking out the door. His threat felt like a hollow echo in the mansion's marble foyer. I left him standing there, helpless and confused. As I was waiting for my car, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was a personal, last-minute invite from the VC firm I had signed with. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. The firm, the one that wanted to buy my software, the one that now funded me, was sponsoring Chloe's event. It wasn't a coincidence, it was fate. The invitation was a golden ticket that changed my role from reluctant guest to important partner. I knew then that the universe was lining up for my justice. The CEO of the VC firm would be there, and he would be making a speech. I adjusted the small, black clutch on my arm, making sure the tiny, meaningful object was tucked safely inside. I arrived at the event in a hired car, not wanting to use Lucas's flashy sports car. I walked into the venue alone, the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor announcing my arrival. I was no longer the invisible wife. I was Ava, the founder, and I was dressed for business. The game was about to change in a very public and visible way. I walked into the lavish, buzzing party hall, and immediately all eyes were drawn to me. I was wearing a sleek black suit, tailored to perfection, a sharp contrast to the glittering evening gowns of the other women. I wasn't dressed for a party, I was dressed for a boardroom. Chloe was waiting by the entrance, her smile instantly freezing when she saw my attire. She walked up to me, her eyes sweeping over my simple, powerful outfit. "Didn't get the dress code," she snickered, loud enough for a small circle of guests to hear. I thought we were celebrating, not having a meeting. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, a cool, genuine smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm dressed for business, Chloe," I replied, my voice carrying a quiet confidence that was new to me. I figured tonight's event deserved a professional appearance. She laughed, a nervous, forced sound, clearly thinking I was trying too hard. She led me over to Lucas, who looked mortified by my appearance. I didn't care. I felt like a general walking onto the field of battle. I was an intruder in their world of shallow appearances, and my simple suit was the most powerful statement in the room. The music faded, and the master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone. The CEO of the major tech firm, Mr. Chun, the very man who had tried to buy my company, walked onto the stage. He was the most important person in the room, and he commanded instant silence. Chloe was next to me, her chest puffed out with pride, ready for the praise she thought she deserved for being associated with the event. Mr. Chun cleared his throat and began his speech. He talked about innovation, future partnerships, and the spirit of entrepreneurship. Then, he delivered the punchline. "Tonight, we celebrate not just our new partnership, but the genius behind it," he announced, his voice booming. "We are proud to officially announce our partnership with Project Ember." The crowd burst into applause, a loud, sincere roar of appreciation. Chloe was clapping too, her smile wide and fake. But then, as Mr. Chin introduced the founder, the massive screen behind the stage, which had been showing a decorative background, suddenly displayed one name in huge, bold letters: AVA Technologies. Chloe's clapping instantly stopped. Her eyes froze on the screen, then shot over to me. The applause started to die down, and the silence began. It was a terrifying, absolute pin-drop silence that swallowed the entire room. Everyone was looking from the screen, which still read AVA Technologies, to Chloe, who was turning a ghastly white. Then, all eyes slowly turned to me. They didn't see the wife of Lucas, they saw the name on the screen. My heart hammered with a thrilling, fierce beat. I knew this was my moment. The moment I had worked for, the moment I had quietly schemed for. I took a deep breath, fixed a cool, triumphant smile on my face, and stepped forward, walking slowly towards the stage. I was no longer hiding in the shadows. "You want it visible," I said, my voice clear and strong, cutting through the silence. "Here I am." Chloe stammered my name, a sound of pure shock and horror. Lucas was standing still, his mouth slightly open, a look of betrayal and utter bewilderment on his face. The humiliation I had suffered at Christmas was being repaid tenfold, not with anger, but with overwhelming, undeniable success. I stood at the foot of the stage, calmly waiting for the CEO to gesture me up. The silence continued, a long, agonizing moment of reckoning for everyone in the room. Chloe was the first to speak, her voice trembling and weak. I didn't know," she stammered, shaking her head in denial. "I had no idea." She was close to tears, her carefully constructed world of superiority crumbling around her. I let her struggle for a moment, savoring the look of pure, raw defeat on her face. Then, I gave her a small, knowing smile. "No one ever does, Chloe," I said, my voice carrying a quiet authority she had never heard before. "No one ever does, until the results are gift-wrapped." I didn't need to shout. The silence and the truth were my weapons. The CEO smiled and extended a hand, inviting me to join him on the stage. As I walked past the silent, staring crowd, I saw Lucas. He tried to reach for my arm, a pleading look in his eyes, but I pulled away instantly. He was too late. I was no longer his wife. I was a founder walking toward her destiny. I reached the stage, and the CEO handed me the microphone. The first thing I did was turn and look at the sea of shocked, silent faces, scanning for Chloe, Lucas, and his parents. I held their gaze for a long moment. Then, I reached into my small black clutch. My fingers found the small, identical brown box from Christmas. I pulled it out and held it up for everyone to see. It was the same size, the same plain wrapping. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I peeled the paper off slowly. Inside, of course, was the small velvet pouch. I opened it, and I didn't pull out the plain silver keychain from last year. This time, I pulled out a similar keychain, a small, silver loop, but this one was engraved with the stylized logo of Ava Technologies. Attached to it was a small, laser-etched piece of metal, a tiny flash drive shaped like a currency symbol. The value of this tiny gift? I asked the silent crowd. $4.2 million. And that's just the first investment round. The sound of the gas that followed was enormous, a wave of stunned realization. The small, unassuming object in my hand was worth more than every luxury item in the room combined. The room went completely silent. The silence was shattered by a flash of light. It wasn't a planned photo opportunity, it was a media frenzy. Guests started pulling out their phones, not to record a party, but to record a major, breaking news event. The lights of the hall were suddenly filled with the blinding flashes of cameras. I stood on the stage, the tiny, valuable keychain held high for everyone to see. I had planned for the success, but even I was surprised by the immediate, overwhelming reaction. The CEO quickly stepped back, giving me the entire stage. A major tech reporter, who had managed to slip into the event, rushed to the front and shouted a question. I answered it calmly, giving him a perfect, concise quote. Within minutes, the headlines were being written in real time. My phone, which I had purposely left backstage, was surely blowing up. The next day's headline was already sealed. Woman mocked for tiny gift returns as Millionaire founder. The visual of the small keychain on the huge stage was an unforgettable symbol. I had not just succeeded, I had created a brand, a story, a moment that would be impossible to forget or deny. After I finished the presentation, I walked backstage to a small private office, the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. I needed a moment of silence, but I didn't get it. The door burst open, and Lucas rushed in. He looked completely defeated, his tuxedo rumpled, his face wet with sweat. He started begging, his voice a desperate, miserable whisper. Why didn't you tell me, Ava? Why did you keep this secret? He wasn't asking out of love, he was asking out of financial panic. He saw millions of dollars and status slipping through his fingers. I looked at him with the cold detachment of a professional assessing a failed investment. You never asked what was inside the box, Lucas. I replied, my voice hard and flat. You just laughed at the size of the packaging. I explained that I had given him every opportunity to ask about my life, to show genuine interest, but he had chosen his own arrogance instead. He had dismissed me as unambitious, and now he was paying the price. He kept pleading, promising to support me now, promising to be the husband I deserved. But the time for promises was long gone. The final act of the evening was the contract signing. The CEO and I returned to the stage, and a huge screen displayed the partnership agreement. This wasn't a signing, it was a performance of power. I sat down at the table, a pen in my hand, ready to sign the papers that would officially launch Ava Technologies. I looked at the contract one last time. There was a clause I had insisted on, one that was purely for my satisfaction. I pointed to it with my pen. Before I sign, I said, looking right at the cameras, I want to emphasize my first and most important clause. Ava retains full control. Then, with a flourish, I signed the document. The cameras flashed, and the crowd roared again. The applause this time was for the woman who knew her worth and fought for her name. I had given up control once, and it had almost destroyed me. Now, I was reclaiming every part of my life, starting with the very technology one created. My victory was sealed not with a shout, but with the quiet, powerful scratch of a pen. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Chloe deleted her post from Christmas, but it was too late. The internet had already saved the evidence, and her shame was public. The small circle of in-laws and friends, who had laughed at me for months, went utterly silent in the group chat. They didn't know what to say to the woman they had mocked, the woman who was now a major success story. I found a certain grim satisfaction in their silence. It was a more powerful apology than any verbal one. My final act of separation from their toxic world was swift and silent. I called my lawyer and quietly instructed him to remove me from the family trust. I didn't need the small, symbolic inheritance Lucas's family had set aside for me. My own worth was now exponentially greater than anything they could offer. I didn't want their money, and I didn't want their name. I was Ava, a self-made success. The night of the reveal, the video of me holding up the tiny keychain and stating its value hit 20 million views by the next morning. The press couldn't get enough of the story. The quiet wife, the cruel family, the triumphant, spectacular revenge. Never underestimate quiet people, was the top trending comment, a mantra that echoed my own journey. My humiliation had been public, and my redemption was going to be even more so. I had turned their cruel joke into a globally viral moment of success. I spent the next day fielding calls from major news organizations, and every interview was a chance to talk about my business, not my marriage. I made sure to mention the importance of owning your own work and never letting anyone dismiss your dreams. The viral moment was not the end of my story. It was the massive, public announcement that a new era had begun. I immediately rebranded my company. Project Ember became Ava Technologies. The name was a statement, a declaration that I was the source of the power and the innovation. My vision for the company was clear. I built a workplace that was the opposite of the cold, dismissive world I had just left. I intentionally started hiring single mothers, women in STEM, and marginalized coders, people who, like me, have been overlooked, underestimated, or forced to put their dreams on hold. My company wasn't just about code. It was about giving opportunities to those who deserve them. I wanted my success to lift others. My new company's slogan became a quiet promise, small beginnings, massive impact. The irony of the slogan was not lost on me. Every employee understood the message. They were all part of the phoenix rising from the ashes. I was building a legacy of genuine empowerment, not just a successful company. The final shoe dropped a month later. Lucas filed for divorce. His lawyer tried to spin it to the press, claiming he wanted to save face after the intense media scrutiny of our marriage. They tried to position him as the victim of a manipulative, secretive wife. But the press and the public saw right through it. They had already crowned me the heroine of the story. When my lawyer told me the news, I smiled, finally giving me the gift I wanted. I said quietly, it wasn't a sad moment. It was a moment of pure, complete relief. The marriage had been over the moment he looked away at the Christmas dinner table. Now, the legal document simply finalized the emotional reality. I was free. I was no longer Lucas's wife. I was Ava, the founder and the millionaire. The divorce proceedings were where Lucas made his last, desperate grab for control. He was shocked by my success and furious that I had kept it a secret. He demanded half of my assets, half of Ava Technologies, claiming it was community property acquired during the marriage. His lawyer argued that I had built the company while I was his wife, and therefore he was entitled to a massive portion of the multi-million-dollar valuation. I simply sat back and watched the show. When it was my lawyer's turn, he did not argue. He just slid a single, crisp document across the mahogany table toward Lucas. It was our prenup. Lucas had insisted on it when we got married, thinking I had nothing of value. I had, of course, signed it without a fuss. He completely paled as he read the clause. When I had sold my first small stake in the company years ago to move with him, I had used the funds to set up an offshore asset protection account. The account's main purpose was to hold the intellectual property rights and all future proceeds from the Sentinel AI software. The prenup specifically stated that any assets or businesses established with funds outside of our shared marital income were considered separate property. I had kept my business separate, unknowingly preparing for his eventual betrayal. A year after the infamous Christmas party, I hosted my own event. It wasn't a holiday party. It was the official launch celebration for Ava Technologies' new headquarters, located in a luxury penthouse overlooking the city skyline. It was elegant, modern, and completely mine. The guest list was a mix of investors, successful founders, and my brilliant, diverse team. I was standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows when I saw her. Chloe arrived uninvited, her face a tight mask of forced politeness. She tried to blend into the crowd, hoping for a chance to talk to me. I walked right up to her, holding 2 champagne flutes. I handed her one. "This time, it's on me, Chloe," I said, my voice warm and genuine, without a hint of malice. She stammered her thanks, clearly expecting a cold shoulder, but I just smiled. My revenge was complete. I didn't need to be cruel. I was simply moving on, and she was watching. The bitterness in her eyes was her own punishment. I did an interview for a major business magazine on my new penthouse balcony. The reporter, a sharp, thoughtful woman, looked out over the glittering city before turning to me. "I have to ask," she said, "what inspired you to name your first prototype Tiny Gift?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city I now helped power. I felt a sense of deep peace. The gift itself wasn't the keychain, or the initial investment, I explained. The gift was the humiliation. It was the moment I realized I had to fight for myself. I smiled, thinking of the tiny box and the enormous consequences. Because the smallest things often carry the biggest value, if you just look closer. The name was a permanent reminder of where I came from and what I had overcome. The reporter nodded slowly, understanding. It wasn't about the size of the gift. It was about the size of the heart and the mind behind it. My success wasn't just for me, it was for others. At the end of the year, I held a massive press conference to announce a major initiative. I was donating a huge portion of my initial earnings to establish a foundation. The foundation would provide scholarships, mentorship, and seed funding for single mothers and women in tech who were struggling to start their careers. I wanted to help women who were facing the same skepticism and roadblocks I had faced. I named it the Tiny Gift Foundation. The name became an instant symbol of redemption and empowerment. It was a beautiful final touch to my story, transforming a moment of deep personal shame into a public force for good. I had taken their mockery and used it to build a legacy that would outlive their shallow opinions. The next week, I was on the cover of Forbes magazine. The headline was bold, impossible to miss: "The woman who turned insult into innovation." The article told my entire story, from the small startup to the humiliating Christmas party to the triumphant launch of Ava Technologies. But the biggest shock was a photo that trended on social media. It was a zoomed-in, cropped picture of Chloe's horrified face from last year's party, the moment she realized my name was on the screen. The photo was everywhere, and she instantly became a meme, the face of arrogance and underestimation. The irony was sweet and complete. I was on the cover of a major business magazine. She was a cautionary tale trending on Twitter. My visibility was earned. Hers was humiliating. A few months later, I was surprised to receive a request for a quiet visit. Patricia, my former mother-in-law, arrived at my office. She looked older, smaller, and surprisingly humble. She didn't talk about Lucas. She just looked around the massive, quiet office, her eyes full of genuine awe. "We're proud of you, Ava," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. We were completely wrong. Her apology wasn't for the money, but for the judgment. I knew she was speaking the truth. I looked at her with respect. "Thank you, Patricia," I replied, my voice gentle. Pride's another small thing that grows big when nurtured. I explained that I didn't hold on to the anger anymore. I had used it to build something real. She left shortly after, a small, sad figure walking out of my massive success. I had achieved the most difficult kind of revenge. I had forced the villain to respect me. 1 year later, the next Christmas party at Lucas's parents' house was a very different affair. I was invited, but this time, the invitation was formal and respectful. I arrived alone, a powerful figure commanding attention in the room. The extravagant gifts were still piled high, but the atmosphere was tense. Everyone was waiting to see what the founder of Ava Technologies would bring. I walked to the gift table, and all eyes followed my hand. I placed a single, plain envelope on the table. No ribbons, no bows. Everyone waited nervously, their faces tight with curiosity and fear. I looked around the room, feeling a profound sense of closure. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Don't worry," I said, my voice carrying throughout the room. "It's just an invitation to opportunity." I didn't need to give them a gift of value. I gave them a gift of choice. Inside the envelope were invitations to my company's next major innovation showcase. It was a chance for them to witness true innovation, to learn about real value, and perhaps to invest in their own future rather than laugh at mine. The camera pans over my new company headquarters, the vast, light-filled space where a team of brilliant, diverse women are working quietly. My voiceover provides the final line of my story, the ultimate closure. They mocked my tiny gift. I remember the laughter, the shame, and the quiet resolve. But that was their mistake. They had only seen the size of the box, not the power of the idea. Because what I gave wasn't small, it just hadn't grown yet. I had risen from the ashes, and my legacy was a roaring, brilliant fire. Thank you for reading my story. If you love the story of quiet revenge and ultimate triumph, hit the subscribe button and let me know your favorite chapter in the comments below.